We're moving on to our next topic of the evening, and that is government spending. And our first question is, what segment of public spending is most inefficient or unnecessary? Young Americans for Liberty?
All of it? Just kidding. Social security and entitlements, and the military, and the military, a lot of spending on the military is very, very inefficient. To start, for example, for Social Security, it is anticipated that it won't be able, we spend about, right now, it's more than 1.2 trillion on, it's mandatory spending on Social Security, and it is anticipated that it won't be able to pay the people that it owes by sometime around 2030, or like in 20 years or so. And a government program which takes so much money in and is not able to keep the promises to its own people, it shows like what a failure that system is, and definitely needs to be reformed and opted out. Another thing, military spending, a huge, just to finish just a couple of seconds, there is a huge inefficiency. Pentagon doesn't know where $6.5 trillion have been in the last 20 years, meaning 6.5 trillion. That means like the military budget could be cut in half and you wouldn't know it. Thank you.
Greens?
Our current budget overemphasizes defense spending. We spend almost as much as 5 times as much as the next country on defense, and that would be China, just so you know. And we have overcrowded and redundant military bases all over the globe. We have bases that I've personally lived in and been to that provide almost no service whatsoever. This breeds fraud, waste, and abuse, and massive losses of money that nobody can really account for. But also, you may have the misconception that defense spending is our largest area of spending. It's actually not. It's Social Security and the programs that go along with that. And it's been called already bust by Forbes, with $714 billion going into it and actually going out of it, and $646, I believe, billion coming out of it. Yeah, no, going into it. Yeah, so it's underfunded by almost $50 billion.
Democrats?
So I'm going to go ahead and touch on definitely defense spending. We're looking at outdated programs at this point. Our greatest conflicts of the future will be fought through cyber warfare. We're not fighting humongous trench warfare battles like we used to in World War II. We shouldn't have humongous occupations in countries that we have not had a bill, a piece of legislation come through that we've declared war on a country. The executive actions where we are allowed to operate in any country across the world violates international laws. It's not even constitutional, to be completely honest. But what we need to be looking at more so is investing in education, veteran benefits. If we're going to send these people off to war, you better take care of them when they come back. Thank you.
Young Americans for Liberty?
Just one quick thing. Maybe instead of sending them to war, we could cut that entirely and get out of the Middle East, finally, like Obama said we would 8 years ago. Just comment.
Republicans?
So we might spend the most on defense, but as a percentage of GDP, we are actually the 4th biggest spender. China is the largest, even on a GDP scale. And, okay. Our national debt right now is, 19.7 trillion. So the only way we're ever going to get that down, we need to get it down in order for our economy to grow so that investors start investing, so that Wall Street comes back up, and people start buying stuff more. In order to do that, we need to cut taxes and cut most of the government spending. Less government is good. My friend from the Green Party said, Social Security and healthcare is 48% of our budget, and both of those programs are not going anywhere in a positive direction.
Greens can respond, and then we'll move on to the next question.
Well, I think with the Greens, you sort of get pretty much the best of both worlds in this situation, which is a cut in military spending, which we need. U.S. military bases are all over the world. If you look at an article by Al Jazeera, I believe 2011, it showed that U.S. military bases were essentially surrounding Iran. Now, what is the purpose of that? I don't know, but I'm pretty sure if I was an Iranian, I wouldn't be too happy with that reality. So looking at that, I don't think there's a need for this spending. And if we look at issues such as the spending for the public, like welfare, I think we should definitely support those initiatives. And the difference between the Greens and the other platforms, I think our actions would really back up our words in this situation.
I'd like to point out that our plan to end the conflict with the Middle East is mostly based on how we give money to those countries. And if you don't know, we give billions of dollars to countries like Saudi Arabia and other countries that we don't agree on how they spend that money. And they spend it however they want, and in many cases very destructively.
Thank you. Our next question is, how important is balancing the budget in this next presidential term?
Very.
Young Americans for Liberty?
I think balancing the budget is very important, but there is a way to do it. So you could try to increase taxes and balance the budget, but that's not the way to do it because there will be a government taking more of your own money, preventing growth. You may think that you may get more revenue, but no, the revenue doesn't change because no matter how much you increase the taxes, it has been shown that the revenue stays about 19 to 20%, like plus or minus 2 points. So what is very important is you need to cut the spending. And the spending is, cutting spending is crucial because it's a problem across the board. We said with Social Security, with military spending, and all these areas across the board. The way that the government is run is so absurd that an agency, if they don't spend all the money that they were allocated in a given year, they cannot get the same budget. So they need to spend more. It's encouraged to spend more. It's inherent within the government to be inefficient. So you need to cut spending if you want to balance the budget. Thank you.
Democrats?
Of course, it's definitely important to balance the budget. It's going to take critical thought. It's going to take a lot of smart people to figure out how to do that because we've been at a deficit for decades. Thank you.
Greens?
Nobody on this panel is going to propose that we unbalance the budget even more because nobody would vote for us. But also, the Greens have a really structured plan to attack the deficit that we're facing and the horribly imbalanced budget. We want to expand the economy. We want to end the wars in the Middle East, and we want to do that peacefully. We don't just want to go in and eradicate everyone. We want to work out things with countries, how we use the money that we're already giving them. We want to use all of our influence all over the world to try and get this done. And we want that would prevent us from wasting trillions of dollars on jets that don't work. And
Young Americans for Liberty?
In terms of balancing the budget, I personally think a good start would be ending all corporate subsidies, stop propping up regime changes that are expensive, stop giving out money to dictators, and stop propping up failed companies and businesses that are basically hurting our economy.
Republicans?
Sure. Only up until very recently have we actually even had a budget. We went several years that the Senate didn't even pass a budget. So I think above all, we should work together across the aisle and come up with sensible solutions to creating a balanced budget. Another point is, in this country, there's many places where it's more profitable for you to live off of welfare than to actually go get a job. So I think drastically cutting many government programs, there's 126 different anti-poverty programs nationally. That's not including the local and state. So cutting most of government programs, I believe, would help balance our budget.
Greens, and then we'll move on.
Well, I think I have to agree with libertarians on the sense of subsidies for major corporations, if that's what they're insinuating, because I certainly do not support siphoning off money to major corporations who already have plenty of money and are part of the reason why we got into the economic depression that we found ourselves in. Furthermore, if we look at what the Fed has been doing, the moderate sort of position with what used to be Ben Bernanke and then Yellen of qualitative easing, and essentially just another policy to siphon off money from the Federal Reserve and essentially prop up Wall Street. So really, the Green Party wants to hit on into a more extent than even Bernie Sanders and his supporters were really touching upon, and that's really a core issue in this country.
Thank you.